So I'm here in Perrysburg, Ohio, in Wood County, meeting with Corporal Romaker. As you would have seen from our shorter clip, there are some incredible things about this man's life and his distinguished service in our military. Corporal Romaker, we want to thank you again for your time and your willingness to share your story with us. We wanted to give our viewers a little longer of an explanation of the story of your time in Iwo Jima. Can you tell us about the 30 days that you served there? Which branch were you in, and what was that like?
I was in the Marine Corps, and as I ended up, I went there with a battalion of replacements. And on the third day, a group of us went ashore, and someone comes over to us and said, you, and you, come with me, and I ended up with an artillery battalion. So
the first group you were with was an infantry?
Yeah, no, we were just replacements for wherever you're going to be needed.
Gotcha.
As the battle went on. And it just randomly, the way they picked us out on shore, me and two other guys joined an artillery regiment, a battalion, and from that point on, I got involved with the communications that I was trained for, a radio operator, and laying telephone lines. Telephone lines were constantly being broken up and had to be replaced. And one of my scariest moments, two of us were sent out to repair a telephone line at night. And there was no way to follow it but by hand. Until you come to, here's the problem. And as we're going along, one of our black Doberman pincer war dogs jumped up in my face.
Oh, wow.
Within about 2 feet of he hit the end of his chain. He's tied to the guy he's looking out for. And that dog really scared me that night.
Well, I'm sure it would. Any Doberman pinscher's scary. Imagine that in dark, nonetheless.
We come to a point where the wire had been actually cut, not torn, but cut. Well, by that time, there were some troops who decided that they wanted to build a little fence around their foxhole, so they cut our telephone line and tied that on stakes.
Oh, no.
Well, there was no way we can now find the other end of it, so we could not repair the line that night. But repairing telephone lines, if I had any extra time, I helped take wounded people out to hospital ships. On one occasion, I and another fellow with a Jeep and 2 big spools of wire went to lay 2 new lines with an infantry command post. We drove up there and made our connections, and off to the side of us I saw this Marine running, and a machine gunner shooting at him. He stumbled and fell. Now he's scooting on his hind end into a shell hole. I don't think he did get hit, but I told the Jeep driver, says, let's go, Romaker, let's get out of here before that jet machine gunner sees us. I'm going to be running behind this Jeep pulling wire off of 2 spools, and he's going to be driving. And he says, how fast can you run? I think I can run faster than that Jeep will go. So we managed to, within a couple 100 yards, get out of this line of sight and get back there.
Wow.
But I always remember seeing that Marine running, then fall down and scooting on his rear end and get in. It's a very simple thing, but some things you remember, and an awful lot of things I can't recall.
Now, you mentioned, at the beginning they told you, and you go with this unit, and the others went with the other units. That was probably a life-saving decision. I would assume that some of the other men that were chosen to go with other units probably had responsibilities near the front lines, or would have engaged the Japanese. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. The infantry guys, the guys with the the Browning automatic rifles with the demolition charges, with the flamethrowers. Flamethrowers were big targets. Their rate of casualties was much higher than artillery, because part of the artillery job, you know, the island was small enough, you set your guns in place, now they can fire all over the island, they don't even have to move again.
Right, right.
And other than when the infantry lost so many people, they did come and borrow a lot of personnel from artillery units, machine gunners or rifle, everybody's a rifleman, to help replace their losses.
And how many lives were lost at Iwo Jima? American lives?
Right close to 6,000, give or take a few. It was right around 6,000. Yeah.
And how many did the Japanese lose?
Well, they estimated they had a force of 20,000 there, and most of them, 19,000, were lost. After it was all over, there were a few who survived, dug their way out of their holes, and they probably had maybe as many as 700-800 survived out of their original 20,000. Wow. Yeah.
I think a lot of viewers today, we wouldn't understand the topography of Iwo Jima. My understanding is it was all a massive underground fort. They dug holes, they created all these bunkers, and it was basically underground caves that were navigated by the Japanese, which made it so difficult to extract them. Is that correct?
That's exactly what it was. They had spent months and months, engineers, honeycombing this whole island. You could clear out a machine gun post and go on past it, and from some other area underground, somebody would come back to that same thing and be firing again.
Amazing.
Their hospital was underground. It was layer after layer of these people living underground like rats.
Wow.
It was a terrible place for those people. They ran short of food and water. There was no water on the island, and but getting them, they almost all had to be rooted out. Their cave entrances blown up and sealed up. It was difficult. Not many of them they'd come out at night and try to steal food and water from you. You had to be careful at night.
Amazing. So the battle on Iwo Jima was critical. It was a pivotal point in the war. One of the turning points, in fact, in the war, as we mentioned previously, because it secured the air.
Yes.
It secured the air from Japanese air fleets, allowing our bombers to go into Japan unhindered. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was a great help for the Air Force, because these Japanese fighters could go up and cause all sorts of trouble for the bombers. Now we could put up our own planes. The new, at that time, the P-51 fighter was our newest one. That and the Corsair, terrific planes, would fly escort with our bombers to Japan, and they could get back as far as Iwo Jima. They couldn't make the round trip from Saipan, Tinian, those places.
So it made it closer, and that ultimately led to what closed World War II in Japan, and that was the nuclear bombs that were dropped on Japan. And many today would question the decision making behind that, with the loss of life that occurred amongst the citizenry of Japan. But you stated something interesting. You said that there would have been many more Japanese lives lost if a war would have happened on Japan, if invasion would have occurred. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. There's no place for all these people to hide. That country it was already devastated by bombing. In fact, one of the bombings you don't hear too much about was the firebombing of Tokyo, when this fleet of bombers went there with nothing but incendiary bombs. It was their intent to set that city on fire. and the loss of life in that firebombing was almost equal to an atomic bomb.
Oh my.
It was very, very bad.
Mhm.
And the civilian population would have been so decimated with the bombing and the heavy shelling. Much, much worse. I would think 10 times worse, maybe more than that, than the atomic bombs.
Mm.
And then there would have been our side of it that suffered the same way.
Mhm.
Because the Japanese were really ready with suicide boats, suicide torpedoes. One guy ride this torpedo. It was their intention to hit the troop ships to cause as many casualties as they could. They figured that was the way to get us to stop, was to have so many American casualties,
Mhm.
and they were ready.
So Harry Truman's act and decision of dropping nuclear weapons into Japan, at the end of the day, the tally was, it would have been lower. It would have been much lower than it would have been had we have needed to invade Japan.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, much.
Now, one of the things that I like to often consider is the hypothetical. The hypothetical of what if the Japanese had defeated us in World War II? What do you think they would have done on mainland America, on American citizenry? Would the restoration of our country, if Japan were in our shoes and they had occupied our territory, would it have been the same as it was for us when we were in Japan, or very different?
I'm sure it would have been very different. We went into Japan and immediately started to rebuild and help these people, help that country survive. And it's hard to imagine what the Japanese would have done to our country. Without a Japanese mind to know what they would have done, I can't really comprehend how bad it would have been, but it would have been the end of America as we know it.
Well, they ruled with an iron fist, so I would assume that the similar style of governance would have occurred here as well.
Oh, sure. The military was running things.
Now, you served in Japan for a full year after World War II had ended.
Yeah,
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
9 months I was there. And what I found there, one of the things right away, quite a few people could speak some English, so you could communicate with a number of them. And one of the first older fellows that actually talked to come up and told me that they were happy this war was over. They hated that war, but the military was in charge and there's nothing that the civilians could do about it. And the civilians were down to having I don't know how they existed, they had so little.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was taken from them. But as individuals, once we were there a while, you get to know and talk with them. These people are much the same. They really are. The families who lost their sons and husbands and brothers, these ladies, these mothers, we're all like mothers in this country.
So what you defeated was an ideology of imperialism, communism, and by defeating that ideology, you actually gave freedom to the oppressed citizenry of Japan, giving them chance and hope that they could be restored. And we've seen the story of Japan today with incredible economic advantages and gains over the course of the last.
I recall one Japanese lady way back then. We had a Stars and Stripes newspaper that was being printed, and they interviewed some lady, and she made the comment that when women ruled the world, there'd be no more wars. And I've always remembered that.
Was there one,
So if there's some good woman in politics and wants a job, I'll vote for her.
Yeah. Well, we got a good one in Wood County. That's Teresa Gavarone, as we talked about earlier. She's running for state
Yeah,
rep.
she's got signs in my yard.
You're right, she does. We also have two that are pretty amazing who are unopposed. Molly Mack for Common Pleas Judge, and we also have Doris Herringshaw,
Yeah.
who is our leader of commissioners. And I think that's a beautiful thing about America, is the way that we have begun to embrace, and we've been doing this for decades, but the idea of freedom, no matter who you are, the content of your color of your skin, your gender, whatever your background is, the American people can vote somebody into office who best represents the values that fit that community.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I wish you could have had were a ticker tape parade, because coming back a full 9 months after the war had ended meant you probably didn't get to go to New York and see all the confetti coming down. So tell us a little bit about your homecoming, coming back to Wood County.
I came back to the little town of Distler, Ohio. I was discharged in Quantico, Virginia. And on a train, came back to Distler, Ohio. And there was the Welcome Home Committee. 3 people, my dad and mother and my younger brother. That was it.
Yeah, wow. Well, I think that as time has gone on, including with this lovely frame here, more and more people have become aware of your story and have begun to celebrate it. So 3 people in 1946, but now thousands since then, have heard the sacrifice that you made in your story in Iwo Jima.
Well, as it turns out, starting about 30 years ago probably, I had been asked to speak, to say something. And this led to more and more public speaking. I've become speaker at veteran dinners. I've become the speaker in different schools. The speaker on Memorial Day service at the cemetery. Once I got started, it didn't seem so difficult to do, and quite a few people would ask me. I got started, I had a grandson in Anthony Wayne High School, and his history teacher, somebody, asked the kids if they knew anybody had any relation that might come to the school and talk on my grandson. Yeah,
right away. My grandpa.
My grandpa will do it.
That's great. Well, I can see why. I think we all can see why. You speak so well. Your memory is sharp, and the story that you've given us today, I think, gives us hope. It gives us hope that there are so many that have gone before us that give us the ability to embrace our freedoms today, and we cannot but look back with gratitude. So we want to thank you, Corporal Romaker, for your sacrifice. Thank you for continuing to be the voice that we need to hear in this generation in 2018, so that we can continue to make the right sacrifices to advance the ideals of this republic, which are inalienable. Those ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which come from God alone.
One of the things that I have been rather proud of over the years was walking in the Memorial Day parade up until I was 89 years old.
Oh my word, that's incredible.
I think the oldest one ever to walk in the parade here in Perrysburg.
Yeah, that's outstanding. 89. Well, you still look healthy and vibrant and strong.
Well, I'm 93 now. I'm beginning to slow down a little.
Well, you're still looking good, you and your wife here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Corporal Romaker. I can tell you from the Wood County Republican Party, thank you very much. We really appreciate you, your wife, your lovely family, and we're just delighted to be able to hear your story.
Yeah, we've already voted. We voted early,
Well, I got to shake your hand for that. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So long for now. Okay, thank you.